It's finally here. If you've seen my review of the original Chocobo Racing for the PlayStation 1 or some of my other videos, then you'll know that I've been incredibly hyped for Chocobo GP since the day it was first announced. So naturally, I just had to make a video review for it as well. Unfortunately though, before I even begin talking about the yellow bird and his game, I must first address the elephant in the room. Chocobo GP has had a controversial release and is getting a lot of flack online due to the presence of microtransactions and season passes within the game. And this puts me in a somewhat awkward position because I'm not a fan of those things either, and I wish they weren't a part of this or any game really. And yet, at the same time, I'm going to have to defend Chocobo GP to some extent because many of the accusations being made against it are simply inaccurate and demonstrably false. Again, don't get me wrong, I dislike microtransactions as much as the next guy and certainly understand and even support people protesting against those kinds of systems and practices, but what I don't support is misinformation. And sadly, there's a lot of it out there when it comes to Chocobo GP. Too many people seem all too eager to simply repeat something they happen to read on a random tweet or comment without bothering to fact check, especially if it fuels their outrage, it seems. So even though I'm definitely not an apologist of those kinds of systems and am going to criticize certain aspects of Chocobo GP as a result, I also want to be accurate and fair and not misrepresent the game or outright spread misinformation. So let's just start by doing some fact checking to give an accurate and fair representation of the game, something I feel is sorely lacking in most places on the internet right now. Now, just so you know, I'm reviewing the full game here. Not the free light version, which, let's be honest, is basically just a glorified demo where you can only play as free characters and have a very limited access to the game's various modes. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the accusations and claims being made against the game. Everything is locked behind the season pass, which you have to pay for. Or, as one YouTuber said, all the really fun stuff is gated behind in-app purchases. Okay, so what you actually get is a base roster of 24 different characters, each with their own unique ability, and all of the racing tracks without the season pass or any microtransactions involved. You start with a small number of characters and you unlock the rest by simply playing the game and clearing the story, like in the original Chocobo Racing. Only 2 characters, Cloud and Squall, are tied to the season pass. So does that mean you have to pay extra to get them? Actually no, because we get enough free mithril, the game's premium currency, to acquire the pass for free. So if you purchase the game, you actually don't need to spend any more money to get all the 26 characters available right now. And after using your free mithril to acquire the season pass, the only things left that are gated behind in-app purchases are just cosmetic fluff really, like a hoodie for Chocobo or a couple more songs. Basically, stuff that's completely negligible and surplus to the core experience of the game. But of course, this begs the question. The first pass may be free, but what about future passes? Well, the regular pass, which is enough to get you the 2 new characters that each season will bring, requires 800 mithril. Right now, having already spent 800 on the first pass, I have 600 left, without having spent a penny on microtransactions, and you get 50 more free mithril with every weekly login. So, by the time the second pass arrives 2 months from now, I'll have enough mithril to get that one for free as well. And Square has also already announced that from the second pass onwards, mithril will be added as a reward to the prize pool. So you'll be able to get even more mithril without having to buy any. Now, if you stick with the game for a long while, eventually, yes, you'll probably end up having to spend some money if you want to obtain every single season pass and new character. But with all the free mithril we get, it won't amount to more than, at worst, like $3 per season, and each season lasts 70 days. And personally, from a purely monetary perspective, that doesn't seem to me all that different or worse than the average purchasable post-launch content that many other games put up for sale without receiving any significant backlash. And remember, this stuff is completely optional. I mean, if the base game already offers a sufficiently robust experience and amount of content, later editions are not necessary to enjoy it. For example, I personally only got 3 out of the 12 Super Smash Bros. Ultimate DLC characters, and yet I still enjoyed the game immensely. And I plan to do the same with Chocobo GP. I won't necessarily get every single new character that they add in the future, and that's okay. Again, since I enjoy actually playing the game and feel it came with enough content for its purchase to be worthwhile, not getting every single bit of extra content added post-launch won't undo the fun I'm having and will continue to have. Basically, you can totally ignore the microtransactions and the game still offers a varied and robust roster, a story mode which most other kart racers don't have, and virtually all the other modes that games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe have. Online and local play, time attack, Grand Prix, custom races, and I've been having a blast playing all that, be it alone or with a friend, and the fact that I would have to pay money to get fluff like a recolor for a kart or a hoodie for a character to wear doesn't change that at all. The core fun stuff is still there and can be acquired by simply playing through the game normally without any microtransactions involved. Anyway, another accusation being made against the game is that the paid premium currency can expire after 5 months. And this is another classic case of someone jumping to a wrong conclusion, posting about it on social media, and everyone immediately starts repeating it without bothering to fact check, and before you know it, everyone is bashing a game for things that aren't even true. So here's the truth. The paid currency of Chocobo GP does not in fact expire. Only the mithril that you get for free does, but it still lasts 5 months, which is plenty of time to use it. But remember, if you buy any, which you don't have to, it has no expiration date. Also, when you use mithril, the game automatically spends the free mithril first. Of course, you might not like that a premium currency exists at all. I'm by no means a fan of it either, but misinformation is not okay just because you want to smear a game really badly. Another claim is that the game constantly bombards you with pop-ups to buy the premium currency, when in fact there's only one pop-up when you first turn on the game that tells you about the season pass. That's it. You can click hide after seeing it once and it never shows up again. Hardly something game-breaking or difficult to ignore. People have also been saying that they hid this information about season passes and whatnot until release. Also not true. The existence of a season pass has been known since early February when Cloud and Squall were first revealed. Some people are even saying that Chocobo GP is a gacha game. Again, not true. Gacha games have an in-game currency through which you acquire random virtual items, just like loot boxes. In Chocobo GP, there's no randomness and no RNG involved. If you insist on buying something, you always know what you're gonna get. I've also seen people pointing to Chocobo GP's daily and weekly missions as evidence that this game is a gacha or something, when these missions are completely optional and not tied to the premium currency at all. They just give you gil and tickets, which are not paid currencies and which you can use to unlock alternate vehicles and recolors and whatnot. These missions are just more incentives to play, but just like with achievements or trophies, you don't have to pay attention to them if you don't want to. I've already missed a couple of missions myself, and no, it hasn't ruined the game, it's still working fine, and I'm still having fun with it. Lastly, some people have accused the game of being pay to win. No. You can literally get every single character for free right now, even the 2 characters tied to the season pass, and hell, for what it's worth, based on an early tier list, Chocobo, who is available even on the light version, is top tier. So those are the main false claims I've been seeing thrown at the game, which I felt called for some correction and clarification. Now that we're done with that, allow me to criticize and share my thoughts on the unsavory aspects of the game that are being accurately reported. I have 3 main issues. 1. It takes a little too long to unlock Cloud. Like, the Chocobo GP online mode is pretty fun, but the amount of points necessary to get to Cloud do make it feel like a grind at times. Of course, this is done to incentivize people to either buy the premium pass, where you unlock him right away, or to buy items that speed up the process of leveling up the pass. And yeah, I'm not a fan of that system at all. They do give you plenty of time to do it, but I still don't think it should take this long to get to the new character after you acquire the pass. However, since the game's launch, the devs have already lessened the number of points required for each level up, and further improvements might be on the way, as we learned in a long message from Square Enix and the game's producer about the changes that they're planning to implement in future seasons, which I'll link to in the video description. My second issue is the fact that the pass, which the extra characters are tied to, has, of course, a time limit. Now, it lasts 70 days, so even if you don't play every day, you've certainly got enough time to unlock the new characters at least. But I do think that time-limited passes and content shouldn't be a thing for those who have purchased the full version of the game. Much like with the slow nature of the pass progression, this is obviously a strategy to incentivize people to spend on certain items that make the grind go quicker. Now, if you have no problem ignoring that kind of stuff in the sense of not falling for such statics, then, like me, you'll probably still enjoy the game a lot. But if you really struggle with things like impulse buying or FOMO, the fear of missing out, then, unfortunately, I would have to advise you to tread cautiously into Chocobo GP as it exists in its present state. I say present state because in the message from Square about the changes that they're considering for future seasons, it is mentioned that they are, and I quote, considering making Season Pass items available again later in a different form so that players who started playing later do not miss out. So if that does indeed come to pass, and I think it definitely will, I don't see them making Cloud unavailable forever after Season 1 ends, that would be just stupid, then it will at least mitigate some of the potential anxiety and fear of missing out and whatnot. So yeah, if you're on the fence about the game because of these particular issues, then perhaps it might be a good idea to wait and see how these changes materialize in the near future, and then you can judge for yourself whether you find the result satisfactory. The last main issue that I have is that the only mode that gives you points to level up the pass, and even Gil, is the 64-player online tournament mode called Chocobo GP. Even the daily and weekly missions, which consist of minor things, like use level 3 Magicide 5 times, can only be done in the online Chocobo GP mode. And I think that really sucks, especially for those of us who, like me, actually enjoy playing the offline modes against the CPU and, more importantly, spend a good portion of their playtime on the offline multiplayer, playing with a friend or a family member or a significant other. But the only prize rewards that you get while playing with your actual friends instead of random people online are tickets, and even those you only get them the first time that you clear the various cups in series races. Well, you can also get a lot of tickets in the single player story and time attack modes, but points to level up the pass, as well as Gil, are exclusive to the online Chocobo GP mode. And while that certainly doesn't ruin the game for me, I still think it's a shame. Players who bought the full game should not be forced into the live service mode to get more substantial rewards for their playtime. Sadly, so far there's no indication that they plan to address or remedy this. So, as you can see, I'm quite willing to criticize the game where it's due. I just like to do it based on, actual experience and accurate information, and not sensationalistic and hyperbolic misinformation designed to feed people's outrage. Of course, I know that even after all of this criticism, that won't stop some people from commenting, "How much did Square pay you for this?" Or "Square won't suck you off." Or something like that, but that's okay. Bottom line is, even though I completely understand and support people protesting against microtransactions and the business practices that come with them, I do not agree that, in Chocobo GP's case, they ruin the game at all. Like I said earlier, the in-app purchases are quite negligible. You can get everything that matters, all the racers, all the tracks, everything for free right now. And if you do that, and you're a Final Fantasy fan, or you simply enjoy kart racing games, then Chocobo GP can very much be a blast to play. So, on that note, let's move on to, the actual review of the game itself. Now, many reviews of the game seem happy to just endlessly compare it to Mario Kart, but that's something I'd like to avoid falling back on, as I don't see why the entire subgenre of kart racing games must be limited to a single franchise. Just like it's okay to have action-adventure games that aren't Zelda, it's okay to have kart racing games that aren't Mario, especially if they do many things differently, which Chocobo GP does. For example, it has an actual story mode with cutscenes and dialogue, it has a very distinct and highly intricate item system, and each character stands out as a unique racer beyond their stats, since they all have their own individualized special ability, which gives you a tool completely separate from the items that you can use to gain advantage in a race. For example, Gilgamesh fills the road with swords that act as traps, and each type of sword even has a somewhat different effect when other players touch them, while Shiva can freeze all the other racers, which slows them down and prevents them from using items or abilities for a short while. You can use these special moves when the ability gauge on the bottom left corner fills up to max. It slowly fills up automatically over time, but you can help speed up the process by picking up crystals scattered throughout the race. Also, if you manage to get to 10 crystals, your speed will increase, but you can lose them if you get hit, so beware. As for the items, they consist of magic eggs, which contain classic magic spells from the Final Fantasy series, like Fire or Doom, or even summoning Bahamut. Now you have 3 item slots, and that's because each item can be upgraded if you pick up multiple copies of it. For example, if you have Fire, you will launch a small fireball ahead, but you have to manually aim to hit someone. Now, if you pick up another Fire, you get the level 2 Fyra, which launches a larger fireball that automatically homes in on the racer in front of you. But if you instead hold on to your Fyra, you can further upgrade it to the level 3 Fyraga, which drops a massive fireball directly on the racer in first place. Likewise, all the other items have 3 different levels, with each one increasing in potency and disruptive ability. So there's a neat element of risk versus reward involved, since you'll always have to consider, while in the middle of frantic and chaotic races no less, whether to hold on to your item so that it might become stronger, or to use it earlier to give you an immediate advantage that might end up being crucial for your finishing place in the race. Now, the way you upgrade items is based on the magic egg you pick up. There's 3 types: gold, silver, and copper. Gold gives you 2 of the same item at once. Silver gives you another copy of the item you're already holding, while copper gives you 1 random item. So it's not like other games of the genre, where it doesn't matter which item box you pick up. Here, there's even strategy involved and decisions to make when you reach a row of item boxes. And of course, if other racers are around you, you'll be bumping over those gold and silver eggs for sure. All in all, I quite enjoy this layered and intricate item system, and coupled with the character's unique abilities, it means you have a lot of tools in your arsenal that you must choose wisely when and how to use. The only thing I feel could use a tweak here is in how long it takes to recover after being hit with the most powerful items. It's not so much an issue in the longer tracks that give you plenty of time to make a comeback, but in the shorter ones, it's much more difficult to do so after getting hit multiple times, which can be frustrating. Fortunately, there's a chance they could actually tweak that kind of stuff, since the devs have already said that they'll continue to update and fine-tune the game, and that balanced changes are coming in Season 2, including changes to characters and base mechanics. Speaking of base mechanics, I've just highlighted the most unique aspects of Chocobo GP's gameplay, but of course it also shares many of the familiar staples of the kart racing genre, such as drifting, drift boosts, speed pads, trick boosts, shortcuts, etc. And combined with the aforementioned item and ability systems, it makes for some truly dynamic, rip-roaring races where there's always something going on and you always have to be on your toes. Oh, and in case you are put off by some of the earlier footage of the game because it looked somewhat slow, that stuff was from the beginner speed class, and you can rest assured knowing that there's a higher class called Master, which is considerably faster. As for the steering itself, I'll admit that when you first start playing the game, it doesn't feel quite as smooth as some of the most popular games in the genre, and it takes some time getting used to, but once you do, it becomes quite enjoyable. Though there's definitely a certain learning curve there, which involves stuff like knowing when to drift and when not to drift, among other things. So if you'd like to improve your skills and whatnot, I'll leave a link in the description to a fan server on Discord for Chocobo GP, where there's folks that will be glad to share their advice with you and help you with whatever struggles you might have. Speaking of which, in case anyone thinks this game can only be enjoyed by Final Fantasy fans, I've seen a surprising amount of players that have little to no history with the Final Fantasy series, much less the Chocobo sub-series, and yet are still having a good time with Chocobo GP. With that being said though, I do believe that your enjoyment of the game will be significantly enhanced and exponentially increased if you are familiar with these characters and places and they already have a special place in your heart. As a massive Final Fantasy IX fan, for example, it's beyond heartwarming to me to see Alexandria lovingly brought to life in a full 3D environment and to be able to race there as Vivi or Steiner, while a beautiful remix of Melodies of Life plays in the background. Which brings me to the presentation of the game, which is absolutely top-notch. Like in the original Chocobo Racing, the colorful, cute, and chibi aesthetic is dripping with charm, and it's great to see all of these iconic characters and places brought to life in this way. Likewise with the soundtrack and all of the glorious remixes of classic Final Fantasy tunes that it offers. Anyway, I should probably touch on the online connection now. From what I've seen, it seems okay for most people, but some do seem to have a hard time with it, unfortunately. You'll probably fare better the higher the NAT type on your Nintendo Switch is, A being the best and F being the worst. Personally, after managing to get my NAT type to B, it's been mostly fine for me, although there are still some hiccups like disconnects or desyncs every once in a while, which can be frustrating, especially when you're already deep into a tournament. But overall, based on not just my experience, but also after hearing about other people's experiences in communities like the game's Discord server, it doesn't really appear that Chocobo GP is any worse than the average Nintendo Switch game in terms of online stability. Might even be above average. For most people anyway, there can always be exceptions. But either way, if online play is a big factor for you, then you can always try your luck with a light version of the game, which allows you to play online, so you can see if it works well enough for you. Also, in the post-launch message from the devs that I've mentioned before, they did acknowledge the issues that some people were having with the online, and said they're working to fix them, so hopefully that will improve the state of affairs in the relatively near future. But despite the unfortunate focus of the Season Pass on the online mode, I think the game still offers a lot for people equally interested in playing locally and offline with friends or even against the CPU. Like I said, you have an actual story mode, which is short but sweet and a fun way to learn the game's mechanics and unlock characters, a time attack mode where you can try to beat ghosts and improve your skills and your knowledge of each track, Series Races, which offers 12 different cups, although with repeated tracks, and Custom Races, where you can customize things to your liking, changing stuff like the number of races, CPU difficulty, the speed, or even which items can appear. So again, even if you set aside the pass-related stuff, the game still packs a pretty solid amount of content. The only area where I would say Chocobo GP is a bit lacking in content at the moment is in the number of tracks and their variety. There's 21 overall, but they are based on 9 different locations, with various locations having 2 to 4 variants. Now, some of those variants can be completely different from the others, like with Big Bridge's hyper speed version, which is day and night from the rest, literally, but others can feel a little too samey. So that's definitely an area where more content would go a long way. And thankfully, the devs have already stated that new tracks will be added with Season 2 onwards, and that they'll be readily available for all players, even those playing the light version. I'm assuming they'll add brand new locations too, and I can't wait to see which ones they pick. I hope Final Fantasy VIII gets one, because right now it's the only Final Fantasy in Chocobo GP with a character but no location. Just like with Final Fantasy V's Big Bridge, Final Fantasy VI's Zozo City, Final Fantasy VII's Gold Saucer, and Final Fantasy IX's Alexandria, it would be pretty sweet to see, say, Final Fantasy VIII's Delling City brought to life as a course in Chocobo GP. After all, in the end, there's no denying that a lot of the appeal and charm of the game is in the fan service it offers for longtime fans of Final Fantasy and Chocobo, and nowhere is that more apparent than in Chocobo GP's story, which is filled to the brim with hilarious references to iconic moments in classic Final Fantasy games. And much like the original Chocobo Racing story, it's got this comedic, light-hearted tone that allows them to poke fun at some of the most common tropes in the series with fourth-wall breaking humor to spare. So if you're into that kind of stuff, you'll probably have a good time with the cutscenes. If not, you can always just skip them and go straight to the races. Personally, I enjoyed the story and its portrayal of the various characters, but I did feel that the titular Chocobo was a bit too overshadowed this time, probably due to the somewhat bloated cast, and that overall the story wasn't quite as sweet and endearing as in the original Chocobo Racing, but it still worked pretty well as essentially a reboot of it. And I especially love the chapters focused on Final Fantasy VI and IX. Terra is hilarious in this game, and her father Maduin being reimagined here as a hopelessly doting dad is simply the best. Anyway, I think that about covers it. Obviously there's still things I could talk about, both positive and negative, but this isn't meant to be a thoroughly exhaustive review, or the video would have to be hours long. But if you think I missed anything important or worth mentioning, or if I got any details wrong, feel free to contribute and let us know in the comments. Ultimately, I just hope this review was able to give a fair representation of the game, based on actual experience and accurate information, while also sharing, of course, some of my more personal thoughts and opinions on it. So if you are on the fence about getting the game or not, I hope I've helped you make a more informed decision, whatever that decision turns out to be. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't, then thanks for watching until the end anyway. And if you're a fan of Chocobos and Final Fantasy in general, then consider subscribing to the channel, as I've got more cool videos to offer on the subject. Alright, that's all for now. See you on the racing track, Chocobros.